The background and context of the arrest of Roman Protasevich, a Belarusian journalist and activist, who was detained after his flight was diverted to Minsk by a false bomb threat. Roman Protasevich is a prominent dissident who has been vocal in his criticism of the authoritarian regime of Alexander Lukashenko, the longtime leader of Belarus. Protasevich worked as an editor for Nexta, an opposition media outlet that used the Telegram messaging app to mobilize protests against Lukashenko in 2020. These protests were sparked by a disputed presidential election that many Belarusians and Western countries considered to be rigged in favor of Lukashenko. Protasevich faced several charges in Belarus for his involvement in the opposition movement, including organizing mass riots, calling for sanctions against Belarus, creating or leading an extremist group, and conspiring to seize power. He fled the country in 2019 and lived in exile in Poland and Lithuania. On May 23, 2021, Protasevich was traveling from Greece to Lithuania on a Ryanair flight when Belarusian air traffic control suddenly ordered the plane to divert to Minsk, claiming there was a bomb threat. The plane was escorted by a Belarusian fighter jet and landed in the capital, where Protasevich and his girlfriend, Sofia Sapega, a Russian citizen and law student, were arrested by security agents. The incident caused international outrage and condemnation, as many countries accused Belarus of hijacking the plane under a false pretext and violating international aviation rules. The European Union imposed sanctions on Belarus, including banning its airlines from flying over EU airspace and landing at EU airports. The United States also imposed sanctions on Belarusian officials and entities. Protasevich and Sapega were held in custody for more than a year, during which they appeared on state television several times, confessing to their alleged crimes and praising Lukashenko. Their families and supporters said they were coerced into making these statements under torture or threats. They also showed signs of physical injuries and emotional distress. On May 3, 2023, Protasevich was sentenced to 8 years in prison by a Minsk regional court. He will serve his time in a high-security penal colony. Sapega was sentenced to 6 years in jail for inciting discord. Their lawyers said they would appeal the verdicts. On June 25, 2021, both Protasevich and Sapega were transferred to house arrest, after they reportedly requested it and confessed their guilt. They are now living in separate flats in Minsk, under surveillance and restrictions. Their families have been able to visit them occasionally, but they are still not free to leave the country or communicate with the media. The case of Protasevich and Sapega has drawn attention to the plight of thousands of other political prisoners and activists who have been detained, tortured, or forced into exile by the Lukashenko regime. It has also highlighted the struggle for press freedom and human rights in Belarus, which is often called Europe's last dictatorship.